But if you're talking about rifle fighting for medium ranges, taking full advantage of the ballistic potential of that cartridge, I'd recommend something like this.
Hit. Hit. Hit.
I pulled that one to the right.
So,
well, that's easy.
yeah, that was
You're at the farther one, right?
yes.
Okay. Green light. Hit. 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 I don't know.
Miss.
Probably. You know, it's like really hard finding the buttons on these cameras from the other side, I'll tell you what. Hey guys, Rex here. So today we're going to talk about the optimum fighting scope for your rifle. Okay, now if you're talking about normal distances that most guys fight, you know, point blank range 0 to 300 meters, I would definitely point you in the direction like something like this, like aim point kind of deal. It's going to be really quick on target, and you're going to have plenty of accuracy out to 300 meters if you kind of halfway know what you're doing with the rifle. Pretty simple choice. I like aim point. The PRO is probably one of the best values. Hollow Sun makes a real affordable alternative to some of the other red dots, like the T1s and stuff are really good too. There are a lot of options when you talk about those. I kind of like aim point and Hollow Sun if you don't got a lot of money. But if you're talking about rifle fighting for medium ranges, taking full advantage of the ballistic potential of that cartridge and really extending your safety distance, because hopefully if you're engaged in full-on combat, you want to extend that range farther away from you. The farther away they are from you, and the better you are at engaging them at that range, the safer you are and the more unsafe they are. And that's kind of what you're trying to achieve with the fighting rifle, right? Where you plan on getting in a fight kind of deal. This could be for liberty preservation, protecting the country overseas, whatever. I'd recommend something like this. Hey, most of you guys are already probably familiar with the Trijicon ACOG scope, right? It's been on the books in terms of patents since like 1989, so it's been around for a while. It took a little bit of time before it was more fully deployed. The Marines use them, some of the Army units use them, some of the Navy uses them. They're a very commonly seen optic. Even around the world, some other outfits are using similar deals. This is the TA31 on my Colt M4 here, and that's just a bone stock Colt M4 is what I'm running on this thing. And there's a few different configurations of these scopes, and I think that there are ones that have advantages over other ones, and we'll get into that in a minute. But first of all, a lot of folks are generally familiar with the ACOG, but they don't know the specifics of why it's so well respected or why it might cost a little bit more money to make the goofy thing, okay? Now, what you're looking at here is what they call a prismatic optic. On a lot of rifle scopes, you have a erector assembly, which is a series of lenses which eventually erects the image in an upright fashion, okay? And that's a lot of times where they have, when you're adjusting your turret mechanisms, that's what presses on that whole tube assembly, the erector assembly, to adjust it. And there's different ways to configure scopes. But generally speaking, a prismatic design, and if you look at this critter here, there is a small prism right in this area, right in the middle of the scope, that is the prism, okay? And that's going to give you, it's going to fold the image in such a way in that prism that it erects that image in a lot shorter space and with a lot less lenses as well. So you got an inherently way more simple design and something that's able to be a lot more compact. And that's why you can get a small optic that still has really good quality, because the less different lenses you have to stack together to get one image, I'm not going to say the easier it is. There's a lot of tricks to getting a prism cut correctly. But in terms of mechanical simplicity and ruggedness, this is a good way to go. There are lots of scopes that have prism designs, and generally speaking, what you're going to find is they're going to be very tough. Very dang tough. It's going to be hard to knock the crap out of them and break them in terms of shock resistance and stuff like that, knocking any one of those little intricate lenses loose in your conventional scope design. A big old prism in here radically simplifies things. And in the Trijicon, a big chunk of what you're paying for is there's a couple different components to the prism. And the prism assembly on these things is preferably generally of a Schmidt and Pecan Z type, and includes a roof prism and a helper prism. And if you look at the diagrams here, this is all information available for public release. You just read the US patents, and you can see a lot of neat stuff. You can learn a lot about anything just by researching it. And if you look at this, you can see that the roof prism and helper prism are separated by a narrow air gap defined by a U-shaped opening. And with binoculars and scopes using a prism assembly, it's conventional practice to have the roof prism and helper prism arranged in reverse order. Typically, the helper prism is located closest to the objective lens system. And with the Trijicon ACOG, which is kind of a unique deal, they were one of the first outfits to introduce this new idea. The preferred orientation locates the effective focal plane within the confines of the prism assembly. Thus, this preferred orientation facilitates calibration via an internal adjustment operating on the image erector assembly. And the roof prism assembly also facilitates in the design the efficient ocular system, permitting that compact structure we're talking about. So if you consider the roof prism in here and the helper prism, they're constructed and located in conjunction with the objective lens system so that the image is focused at this mirrored surface, which is labeled as G on your chart there. And upon that surface is the reticle pattern. So your reticle pattern, that surface G is actually etched with silver, and that's what gives it kind of the mirror, so it reflects the image, and inside that silver is where that's etched. So it's kind of a different design that's actually pretty tough. So you got an etched reticle. And for those of you who have got the pleasure to use one of these things or look through them when the lenses are clean and not all full of crud and stuff, you will notice that these things are like really clear. And you might wonder why. It's not that fantastic Asian glass like you might be used to. This is German glass actually in these things. That's one of the reasons they're so nice. That's one of the top secret deals. So the prism material for the helper prism is actually shot back 4 glass, BAK4. And the material for the roof prism is shot BK7. So you're talking some top quality glass. That's like some of the best glass in the world. It is high density glass, which means that it accounts properly for all 3 different colors of light to intersect into the exact same focal point so that you get a crisp, clear image. And when we're talking about color correction, we're not talking about the color looking like the right color. We're talking about the different wavelengths of the electromagnetic radiation all being bent appropriately by different densities of materials as they pass through the materials, and they all come into focus. That's what gives you that actual crisp, clear image. And Trijicon employs that shot glass that you're not going to see unless you get into that real expensive German glass. Like if you look at some of the high-end precision rifle optics up there. They cost $2,500 to $3,000 for a lot of them things. So if you haven't seen what it looks like to look through shot glass, this is probably one of the cheaper scopes that you can get that in, and it's really good stuff. And this being a relatively simple, compact design, they still were able to keep it at around $1,000 or maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. Just because of the inherent simplicity of the design, which is also conducive to its very, very rugged nature. So a lot of you folks, when you talk about the Trijicons, you go straight for the Tritium subject. And that's something worth talking about too, is these things do have illumination, battery-free illumination. This is a TA31, and this actually does have, I got my tape on here. You got the fiber optics deal, okay? And that can help to boost your illumination if needs be. Some guys keep tape on these things for daylight when you don't really want over illumination, when you're trying to really see the details on a reticle. If you've got a good reticle in one of these, and I'll talk about reticles in a minute, you want to be able to use that thing. And if it's too bright, a lot of guys like to use tape on them, so that's what that is if you're not familiar with that. But if you consider tritium is actually a radioactive isotope of hydrogen, and as it is encountering radioactive decay, it emits visible light, which is pretty handy. And so what they do is if you look closely on the scope here, where this comes in, this fiber optic tube, there's a little bump here, right in here, and that's where you have a tiny little pill or a little container of tritium gas, and that's arranged in such a way to where it can reflect against that reticle. The light is directed into the reticle. So tritium has a half-life of 12.7 years, which means that every 12.7 years, half of that material has been decayed. So it'll lose half its power, or rough equivalent in about that amount of time. So you got a good 6 years of relatively bright illumination on one of these, before you start to see some problems. And then at 12.7 years, you got only half. And some guys might consider that not quite enough. Honestly, you only need enough illumination to just barely see the reticle. It doesn't need to be real shiny. That's not really going to help you a lot. Now, if you're employing what they call the bend and aiming concept, maybe a more bright reticle is handy. And Bindon is actually the guy who holds the patent on this entire optic. He's the guy that designed this. And what that is I was talking about, you leave both eyes open, which you should be doing anyways if you're operating a rifle scope, to be honest. Some guys talk about the bend and aiming concept like it's a thing unique to scopes like this, and that's actually on any rifle scope. It is a good practice to keep both eyeballs open. So when you're watching your sniper movies, that's something you can tell if they've done their research enough. If the one guy's got his eye closed and he's mashed up his other one into there, that's fake, okay? That's not how a scoped rifle aficionado is going to operate that weapon. But make a long story short, you leave both eyes open, and then you're going to see the bright illumination, and you can walk around, and your brain will impose that image onto the overall picture, which you see with both eyes open, which is going to be zero magnification, okay? Because your brain can balance all that stuff out. There's a supercomputer up in here. The visual actually is back in here, the ocular part of the brain, which figures all that stuff out for you. So it's just using your biology to help you in close quarters combat, which is always fun. So anyways, inside here you got this tritium, which by the way is also used in thermonuclear weapons as part of the fusion. Pretty fancy stuff, and Iron Man used it, so tritium is also in the Trijicon. So anything that uses tritium is awesome, right? Iron Man, thermonuclear warheads, and Trijicon scopes. And like we said again, that reticle is etched on the silver surface of surface G on the diagram. Pretty interesting stuff. So that's the story on the scope. Incredibly rugged is the number one thing why guys kind of like these. They're built stout. They use thick aluminum, aircraft grade aluminum. It's funny how a lot of times the stuff they advertise the most on these scopes is actually not the stuff that makes them the best. A lot of those little details that we just went over are actually what are worth a lot, like the back for the BK7 and the BK4 glass from Schott, Germany. That's like a really nice feature. incredible stuff, and also just the inherent design of the Prism. It's not something that's generally advertised as much. Normally, people just see the silhouette or the footprint of this thing, and they notice that it's the same kind that they saw the Army guys or the Marines on CNN using. You know, with the kind of forward tilt on there, so that if you got rain coming down or whatever, it doesn't splash on your glass and keeps the sun out of it and all this business, right? So they see that, and it's on your Nintendo game. So that's why people think Trijicon is cool, because it's such a effective little optic and a kind of a unique looking one to where it became popular just by looking at it. And so a lot of guys like to run the Mall Ninja stuff, and they run this. But in reality, it actually is an incredibly well-deserved reputation that these things kind of do kick ass. They're a good little scope. So a lot of you might be curious exactly which model would be the better one to get. Now, in my opinion, I think that it's best to utilize everything that this cartridge has in terms of poop for all your distances, because like we said before, if you can be effective to the max effective range, that's a lot more effective than not being effective at the max effective range, right? And if you can only shoot 300-400 meters with your little AR, your M4, your whatever, right? You're not really keeping up with your full potential. So that being said, effective reticle is really going to be the tool in the toolbox. That's something Mr. Paul McCoy said on his scope explanation video on what you're looking for in a tactical scope, is this whole thing is designed, this is the toolbox that's holding the actual tool, which the fighting tool is the reticle. That's what tells you where the bullet's going to go. That is arguably one of the most important parts of the entire system. You can have everything be real reliable and real clear, but if you can't see what the heck you're shooting at, or you don't know where to hold for your different ranges, it's not going to help you so much. That being said, there are reticles in these that are like greatly superior to some of the other ones. So there's a lot of different configurations of reticles available for these. Everyone seems to have their general preferences, but my preference, and I'll share this with you guys, it's just my personal preference, because I like to actually shoot at like what a lot of people would consider to be long range for maybe an M4, like 600 or 800 yards. And so that's a lot farther than a lot of people are comfortable shooting. And some of these have gotten battlefield reputations that these aren't really effective at long range. Well, maybe they're not using the exact right reticle. This one is the Advanced Combat Sighting System reticle that is in this one, and it actually gives you very accurate ballistic drop compensation out to 600 that is very easy to get on target, and even gives you a holdover out to 800, which you're starting to push it with the wind a lot of times, but in a fighting rifle, you have no shortage of being able to pull the trigger, right? Because you can reload. So you can send a couple rounds to either scare the crap and suppress the enemy, lay down suppressive fire that's very effective, or even nail them at 800. If you know where to hold, this ballistic drop compensation system in this particular reticle is balanced out very well. Some of the other BDC systems are not as helpful. This one, actually, the Advanced Combat Sighting System version of the TA-31 gives you the wind hold-offs, which is the detriment of the 5.56 millimeter round beyond 300 meters. Inside 300, you pretty much hold right on the guy, or you hold on the bad guy, and you shoot, and he's pretty much toast, okay? Beyond 300, those little 62 grain projectiles start getting thrown around pretty bad. And so having some kind of aiming point that's going to help you account for that in a logical fashion is going to be very effective. And the Advanced Combat Sighting System actually has a series of wind hold-off dots in conjunction with adjacent ranges. So if you're at 600 meters off to the side of the reticle, you're going to see the wind hold-off dots for a given mile per hour value of the wind, which in this case I believe is a 5 mile an hour value. And if it's a 10 mile an hour wind, you just double that distance. But it gives you a reference point, so you know about where to hold for your wind. Also, this one is also equipped with some lead dots. If you've got running targets that are running full speed at 90 degrees, you can use those dots to lead the target, and it's actually a very effective way of doing that. And to put the cherry on top, this particular reticle that we're looking at here has off to the side, but you simply put your target inside of those brackets, a certain size, right? And it'll give you the distance that is. It's like using mils in your tactical long-range scope, except this is a quick reference. Very similar to what the Russians actually employed on their SVD optics, which gave them a huge cutting edge back in the Cold War days with their designated marksmanship programs. And so if you put the correct optic on your little M4, all of a sudden you change it from a kind of a point-blank fighting system to a medium and even almost long-range fighting system, to where you can actually be super deadly and super effective out to the max effective range of this cartridge, which is arguably inside 800 yards, okay? And so this is really milking every last drop of potential out of this rifle if you use the right scope, and I think it's actually well worth the money. These particular reticles are also available in some less expensive optics, but if you are actually going to plan on using this in a defensive or offensive application when you're fighting with it, I would strongly recommend getting something that is battle proven, and this Trijicon ACOG is the obvious choice in that case. So definitely take a look, shop around. You want to make sure you get the exact right tool for what you're doing. If you're doing something similar to me, you want to milk every last drop of the ballistic potential of your cartridge, then this particular Trijicon is the exact one I would gravitate towards if I were you. But that's just my opinion.
But she hits me, disassembles my leg. So I went to the doctor and he gave me a leg. Now she waits, slumber, dreaming, baby, hope that she